Hi guys, welcome to the Ball of a Passion podcast. Ball of a Passion is an opportunity to sit down with the fans and talk about football and football only. Before we start, let me introduce myself. My name is Karan, and I just wanted to introduce the rest of the members of the podcast. So we've got George.
Hey everyone, how are you doing? I'm really excited for this one, and it's a little bit of a passion project of mine. So let's get into it.
And Chris.
Yeah, I'm don't worry. I'm CK. I love football, that people may know, and I say some outlandish stuff at times.
And for our fallen brother Z today, who's getting his vaccination, we've got Nom on the podcast. So introduce yourself, mate.
Yeah, I think I only qualified for this podcast because I got my first dose, so this is why I'm here. Someone's got to act like the guy, who's at least almost COVID-free. But there you go. All right.
So, as George mentioned today, we've got a quite interesting topic on our hands today. We're talking about the under-23 development of the club and the philosophy behind it. So let's get straight into it. So, if you've seen our first episode, you've seen how we address the structure of the club, and that we've touched on how the youth development has changed and the structural changes. We've actually had some news today about, or was it yesterday? I'm not sure. About a major change in the structure of the club in terms of the youth development. So, does anyone want to take that? Or
yeah, let's just go back to do a little bit of a summary for those that maybe didn't see that first episode. So, what we're looking at about the big structure changes is really what Mertesacker has initiated since 2018, and what he did alongside Marcel Lucassen, who has since left us for personal reasons. But a lot of these real foundations that he's laid in the youth setup have actually set the precedent for how we're conducting our business as a broad whole. So really, again, what Marcel Lucassen had done was set a way of playing. We really didn't have a set way of playing from an Arsenal standpoint through the academy. And when you're looking at youth development and setting pillars for ideology, those are kind of the basic steps that you need in any organization. And so setting an Arsenal way of playing that was consistent among each level of the Arsenal youth is absolutely critical to their integration into the first team, but also into our way of playing in terms of how we view ourselves in world football, right? In terms of our perception in world football, we've been kind of looked at as playing the right way, playing the beautiful way. But sometimes those attacking patterns, if they're not consistently worked on in the youth aspect, it adds a layer of adaptation for a player trying to break through. It's already so difficult for youth to really come in. I mean, youth development is such a mixed bag in general. So laying those foundations were really important from a Marcel Lucassen standpoint. And of course, you can then look on to what we had done again as a recap to that pod from Lee Heron from a youth recruitment standpoint, and then what we moved on to in terms of how we're now recruiting coaches within our very own setup, which are going to be a little bit different from what we've done previously and under a much better head, drawing inspiration, what we hope to show you from, the England actually FA youth setup. So I think Nom might want to take a little bit more into that aspect, but that's maybe a recap of our structure for those that maybe haven't seen the first episode.
Nom, you there, mate?
Sorry, for me, I think all of these points that we are going to be covering are going to be important, because I think what the average fan wants to understand is how we're getting these young players through the system and how they're coming out the other end. I mean, if you look at the profiles of the players we're getting at the end of the system, I think it's really important to understand the processes that are involved, and it's not just random chance that these guys are coming out the other end and are being recognized as unique talents. So I think hopefully when people understand the thinking behind all of these structural changes and how they sort of marry together, they'll understand why we are so excited about some of the young players that are going to come through.
Yeah, with recently, anyways, with Arteta coming in, I think there was a focus on youth in particular, because Arteta was generally seen as one of the best youth coaches or youth changers in England at the time, and we've seen a more focus on transitioning youth through the ranks from under 18s to 23s to loan or to Arsenal in general. So yes, Arsenal, we're happy about the youth coming through, but we've been focusing on it for a long time as a club, but it's not been in the limelight as much until now, to be honest.
Yeah, so the one thing I wanted to focus on, as George mentioned, was the streamlining of the structure. I feel like there was a lot of bloated positions at the club, and people weren't as aware of what their specific role were. So I think with the introduction with Mertesacker as academy director, that we can just we can see a streamlining of the position. And from that, I want to get into what we hear this term a lot. Under 23 core. What is an under 23 core? How do we look at our under 23 core? So does anyone want to define what the under 23 core is and how they view it, or what we think?
Sure. I think, well, when you look at the academy as a general core, right, we start at U23, so that kind of makes sense to do really a cut-off point in terms of what we consider a youth prospect. And of course, a lot of coaches have actually talked about, what makes a youth prospect, because really experience also, I do think, has a role. I look at somebody like Marcus Rashford, who technically is U23, but, he's a senior professional.
6 years.
And, he's been a part of, senior football for quite a while. And, those lines can be malleable, right? But I think generally, if our academy is starting at U23, it makes sense to let that be the litmus test for what you maybe consider a youth. And so when you look at Arsenal right now, I've said this in the past and I've received a lot of heat, but hopefully we can kind of just break down this spine about what we've seen in the Arsenal youth setup. And I believe that Arsenal boast the best U23 core in world football. And yes, maybe a bold statement to make, but when you start comparing our actual production in terms of who is playing first team football in a U23 aspect in the world right now, Arsenal are among the greatest, potentially only rivaled by Chelsea, to be fair, who also have a supremely talented youth setup. But when you start to actually go down through the defense in terms of players that are actually playing first team football and among the top 5 leagues, you look at kind of the defense, right? We've got Saliba, Gabriel, Tierney as in the back right away, who are all playing, kind of first team football. You then go through midfield, as much as they may not be, the most talented and on loans, we've got Lucas Torreira, Matteo Guendouzi, Joe Willock, all players currently playing in top 5 leagues of midfield. You want to go down further, there may be other prospects that we may want to throw in there, like an Aziz from an Arsenal standpoint, who is excellent and who has the potential. You may want your Patinos, but really I mentioned those first couple because those are confirmed playing in first teams. You then go to the attack. We've got Saka, Emile Smith-Rowe, Martinelli, Nelson, Balogun, all who have made debuts for the first team. And we haven't even mentioned my favorite youngster, Keto Taylor-Hart, in terms of the pool. So when you start to go through that spine, and we'll probably get into it a little bit later in the pod, but in terms of an actual academy prospect, we probably have a very guaranteed prospect almost in every position, bar, I would say, left center back and left back from an academy standpoint. There are very good prospects that are probably being eyed for first team football in every other aspect on the pitch, really. And so when you start looking at boasting a U23 core squad, not only are you looking at structure changes, but just to give you some specific names why we want to maybe make that claim, that's huge. The other thing going into why are we producing this, though, because I think Nam had mentioned it isn't coincidence, and I don't believe it's coincidence. It's not just, the class of 92 all over again. In this case, it would be multiple years. We've seen huge generations right now at the U18 and U23 level. And why is that? That's due to structure changes. So I think we should get into really the changes, particularly at coaching level, that Arsenal have employed since really 2018 that have led us to have these actual youngsters, unless anybody's got some extras on, maybe somebody I'm missing in terms of a player profiles to that.
I think you forgot Tyrese John Jules, who has played professional football because he made his professional debut with Doncaster Rovers.
Daniel Ballard, now that I think about it, who's also come up from
promoted with Blackpool.
Yeah.
Zach Medley, who just left. Just left us.
I want to ask both of you guys, and Nom just returned.
Reece Nelson, you forgot to mention.
Reece Nelson, but I want to mention this because I can hear the question already being posed to the people. You guys are saying. I mean, I completely agree. We do have one of the best under 23
The
cores
best.
in the best. I mean, one of, if not the best. I think I can agree with. What I'm gonna say, and what I'm gonna say, I'm sure, assuming rival fans will say, well, what about something like La Masia? Do we have something comparable to that? Are we looking at something that's like on that kind of level in the past, or are we looking at something completely different, revolutionary wise, or how would you compare it to like a great academy of the past and bring it towards compare it to what we have right now?
Can I come into that? Do you guys
Yeah,
mind?
do it.
I looked at, for example, when I, as you guys know, my past is my past and my present is in teaching, and I remember when they started moving a lot of kids into Hale End before they've, the Hale End Academy development. I've been watching it over 20 years. I first got interested in it because there was a job offer to go in and teach science for people who've got some sort of football knowledge, and I remember having to turn it down. It was like would have been my dream job to work at Hale End. But what impressed me, this is donkey's years ago. I'm talking about 20 odd years ago, longer than 20 years ago. And I remember then I was really impressed at that stage that they were actually trying to marry teaching of their youngsters as they were coming into the academy with professional teachers, as well as people who have some football knowledge. So this is 20 odd years ago. Now, since then, obviously, we've repumped money into Hale End, restructured it, looked at the training facilities. And one of the things that Lucassen did, and I'm sure you guys touched on this, is that he brought all of that overview experience about how an academy should be set up. That includes looking at what La Masia did with, the terms of how they indoctrinated their players into that culture and got them to understand tactics and principles of play and understanding the Barcelona way. Now, when he came in, he was shocked because, we talked between us fans at the fan level that we had an Arsenal way, foreign, commentators commentate and say, well, look, that's the Arsenal way. They're walking the ball into the net. They play this kind of football. But the truth was, when he came in, he was shocked that he couldn't see that consistent application of that in the academy amongst coaches and the people that were there. They could parrot those phrases, but they didn't actually know what that meant. And part of his job was to go around finding coaches, influencing coaches, and influencing the Hale End Academy to make sure that all of that philosophy was clear to the players and it married in. And I think that's what led to Mertesacker getting appointed, because they felt he was the embodiment of, a kid who grew up. He didn't come through the youth system, but he grew up supporting Arsenal, ended up playing for Arsenal. He had that sort of cerebral ability and understanding to be able to take that job. Now, Hale End Academy has been restructured so that there are classrooms there now, and it's more it's not just a school education that they're getting there, but they're almost being indoctrinated the values that we as fans keep on mentioning, but we sometimes, as maybe this new generation of fans, probably don't understand the importance of these values, and these players understand it. And if you look at Saka and Emil Smith-Rowe, just give you two examples, those boys have got all of those values, and they've been indoctrinated since they were young, because they went through the Hale End Academy system, where they're not just working, and I think Mertesacker alluded to this, not just working on the technical skills and their ability to get an education, but what kind of personalities they become and the personalities they want them to become. And I think, as I said, the adults who look after those children at those stages are going to be critical in terms of how they turn out as adults, as young men.
Well, to build off of that point, Noam, I want to get into specifics because I can just hear it from the listeners already. It's wonderful that you guys are speaking so broad, but what are the specific things that, Per Mertesacker has brought in? Well, he's talked about this in interviews, right? The idea of a strong young gunner. And what does that mean? To create a vision and an Arsenal way of playing. Let's get into specifics about the pillars that, Per Mertesacker has done. And so what he's done is he's organized the leading of all the head coaches in the academy to work on a really multidisciplinary team that work out on things both on and off the pitch, right? Creating not just strong mentality for on the pitch success, but life beyond football in case, there is maybe an aspect where we don't make it, because this is the kind of harsh reality of youth development that many of these players won't make it to the first team. That's unfortunately a consequence of the churn of football. And having things set up for youth to understand that, having them to understand the mentality of what's next, I think it's important. I'm sure Noam can agree as a teacher to any kind of youth. It's not just football. It's this idea of having a plan for your future, considering it. And I think it's really important that we've seen this vision and kind of mission from Per Mertesacker. And I think it really leads into producing strong young men that, will be successful in any facet of life. When you look at the 4 specific pillars, though, let's get even more nitty gritty beyond just this term of a strong young gunner. But what are those themes that we really look at here at Arsenal? Well, one of them is being a lifelong learner. Another one is being an effective team player. Lastly, having a champion mentality, and also being an efficient mover. And when you have a 4 kind of pillared approach that you can say, this is what we believe makes a strong young gunner. These are the things that Per Mertesacker has driven since his appointment in 2018, those very specific themes. And, having played at the highest level, he's able to kind of show these youngsters a model professional in terms of how to deal with setbacks, how to deal with success, or how to deal with failure. And when you have a vision that's been outlined, like with Per and with Marcel, it leads into just a strong, reproducible blueprint. That's really what it does lead into. And Per has worked along with our new head of coaching, Luke Hobbs, who, again, we mentioned in kind of our first podcast, but we now have a head of coaching for the academy. This is new. So not only do we have a vision that's now been outlined by Per and, of course, Marcel, we now have a head of coaching who has now started to make changes within our own coaching setup. So not just in terms of creating a philosophy, but we've actually, I think, seen a pattern in terms of who we're recruiting to be our U16, our U18, and now hopefully into our U23 coaching. And we actually start to see a pattern for why we're maybe being innovative in this space. It isn't, again, just, consequence of being lucky. It isn't random. We've set those pillars, we've set that vision, and now we're actually recruiting people that can carry out that vision.
CK, I just wanted to ask you quickly about the relationship between Mertesacker and Mikel Arteta and the streamlining of the system to go from youth team to first team that we've seen with some of the players like ESI and Saka. What do you think about that?
With Mertesacker and Arteta, Mertesacker himself has said one of the main reasons the club actually kept him was to keep him as an attraction to Mikel Arteta. And Mertesacker, the club told him that they want him and Arteta to realise their potential at Arsenal rather than realising it elsewhere. And that right now they're both growing in their roles together as academy manager and manager of the first team. With Mertesacker and Arteta coming in, there's been more of a realisation that we can transition our youth from U23 to the first team and from U18 to U23. With Mertesacker, he's acknowledged that we've always played good football, but he's also wanted our youth to take responsibility. And Arteta has also wanted our players to take responsibility for their actions. And you've seen with this season that our youth now, it may not be positive, but our youth do take more interviews after losses, which I don't think, it may not be positive, but it shows that
I think it is.
Yeah, I mean, it may not be a positive look on the olders in the club, but it shows responsibility in our youth that Saka can come after a loss and talk, or Willock can come after a loss and talk. Mertesacker has been adamant that players can be very good on the pitch, but they need to be able to take responsibility on and off the pitch.
You know what it is for me? It's the fact that you're looking at creating a culture of accountability, as George has mentioned. We're really creating a culture from the scholarship program all the way to the first team. And you're really holding, as CK just said, accountability at every level. And to see these young players in the first team right now say, my hands up, I'm willing to take the responsibility, I'm willing to drag this team forward. It shows that there is a change in the mentality of how we're bringing up players. And on that note, I wanted to talk about what we mentioned at the beginning, the signing of Mr. Gillard himself. What do we think of this signing, and what does it mean for the club?
Yeah, I think with Ken, he's been a great signing. It just falls in line with really what we've been doing, I think, in terms of all of our academy coaches. So what's worth mentioning too is of course Dan Micciche, who was our U16 coach, who's now been moved to the U8 teams, and Ken has been moved towards a U23 coach, but also a loan managing coach. So he'll actually work a lot more closely now with, I'd assume, Ben Napier, our head of loans, in order to facilitate those youth loans far better. We now have an excellent coach who did really wonders with the U18s. I think they had a phenomenal season. They had a great talents, but Ken was a really good part of that. But Dan Micciche is a great, very smart pickup. If you look back at his kind of history, he's come from MK Dons, having done great work there for about 6 years, where he was the head of coaching and academy managers. And then he did work as an FA, from 2013 to I think 2017 as a U16s coach. Before having a quick spell as a manager at MK Dons, and then moving over to us, where again Per Mertesacker has appointed him back in November 2018. And what I think you're looking at here, and I'm sure Nob can maybe kind of evaluate this a little bit better, but we're seeing actually this pattern where we're picking up the best minds in the sport at domestic level. We've talked about this in terms of looking at the positive indicators for our club and why we should be, kind of optimistic for the future. We are looking at recruiting the best domestic talent to kind of facilitate our domestic setup. And I think that's hugely, hugely impressive. You're looking at this commonality of recruiting from the best minds in the FA, who, regardless of what you might think of individual names, maybe, Andy Boothroyd as like a black dog of the setup. But in terms of overall structure, the England FA did an excellent restructuring job in the last 5 years, and it's no coincidence that the amount of English talent pool has actually been facilitated, right? There was a huge restructuring that happened, and I think they've done it quite smart. And I'm really glad to see that we're doing these smart appointments. Again, Per has brought in, Dan Micciche back in 2018. Ken Gillard was replacing Ampadu, who was also a great, Kwame Ampadu was also a great U18s coach, that did work with us. But you're seeing now the youth development take a kind of a change in terms of what we may do. And I think our new U23 coach, who everybody knows, Steve Bolt, has had a difficult, a challenging season, and is being moved on. And that replacement, though, with Ken Gillard moving up into that aspect, but also facilitating loans, I think is such a smart, calculated, and clinical move in terms of we've not only restructured our loans, which we'll get into a little bit later, but having somebody with a coaching background to facilitate those specific loans for our youth is just absolutely immense planning of the highest nature. And it speaks again to a very purposeful approach. This is not coincidence. And I hope we've given you guys some very specific objective evidence to show that why. But I think Nam could probably take over a little bit more in terms of that new U23 appointment.
I mean, I think when I was asking some guys that I know off Twitter who follow the youth, like really analytically, and they, spend a lot of time going to the matches. I think last year they've not been able to go to matches. So I was interested. We knew that there was a restructuring going on. I think there was murmurs of it out in the world of Twitter that Steve Bold might be going, and some people were saying maybe he's going to stick around. But I honestly think that's been up on Steve Bold going has been up on up for discussion and a real point really since Mikel come in. And I don't think it's anything personal. I just think it's an indicative factor that obviously coaching has moved on a little bit more, and there's a whole generation of new coaches. And one of the things that we did, not just with the coaches, and this touches on with other restructuring aspects like the way we scout now, the way we loan players, we had to modernize and revolutionize that within the club. We felt that was an area, probably as a club, when we did our review, that we weren't as good as maybe other clubs, but we didn't want to just copy other clubs. We wanted to make sure that we didn't forget the standards of how we do things to be forgotten in that process. So I think Dan getting promoted, I think it was no coincidence that Dan got recruited because he had experience at the England setup. If you remember back, England have been producing world-class talents in there and being able to harness them. I mean, if you guys are of a certain age, you will know that England have always had world-class talents at youth level, but they've never sometimes achieved the maximum potential at that level. For example, they haven't gone to tournaments and won them, and we started seeing regular intervals that England were being able to produce not only the talent but harness them into teams and coach them effectively, and those were being that led to results where we were winning tournaments at under 16, under 18, and under 21 levels. Right. Well, to be honest, under 21 levels we haven't got there yet, but we showed like a lot of potential. And unfortunately, in tournaments is the thing that let us down. So I'm going back on George's point. I think AD Boothroyd in that setup was definitely something that was a bit of a miss, because those same kids were achieving at a much younger age. Now, us recruiting Dan was an indicative step. I think people didn't realise how much, because now I think, is it Kevin Betsy who's been rumoured to sort of come in and possibly be the under-23 candidate. A lot of people were saying when Micciche came up that it seems logical that Gillard was going to take the step up. But I think this is more of a sideways move for him. I think they like Gillard as a coach, but they feel like his best skills and strengths would be to look after those younger players that he's brought in from under 18s to under 23s, in terms of some of those going off in loan and gaining some experience. I mean, next year, you've got to remember, we've only got one game per season that we're going to be able to offer any potential youngsters in the sort of step up to from under 23s into the first team. So there won't be, unfortunately, that many youngsters coming through into the first team as we'd like to, because we just don't have those competitions available for them. So the loaning of certain players are going to be really important. The way we develop certain players that have already been on loan are going to be important. So Ken is going to play a great, crucial part in that, because Ben's strengths are, his analytical strengths. His strengths aren't coaching. And so what we've realised that he's made excellent sort of relationships with all the players that have gone out on loan. There's multiple interviews out there about players being impressed with his diligence and how he works and how he keeps in touch with them. But they feel like he could do with somebody else helping him with that role, coming from a different aspect and a different angle. And the Betsy link makes sense if you realise that he has been the under 16 and now the under 18s coach. And we are basically reaping the benefits of England doing a lot of review work. When they've gone to tournaments before and they, like the Golden Generation, failed to sort of achieve anything in the World Cups, they were saying, right, what are we doing wrong? We're producing the talent, but why aren't we able to win tournaments? And they went back and looked at their coaching setup. And so I think these two guys are the product of England really looking at their coaching setup and really looking at how they can revolutionise the players that are coming through their team. And we are going to benefit from that, because we are able to bring those minds to our club. And the most important thing, I think, and we'd all agree with this, is the consistency of approach by the coaches. So hopefully we will see that consistency of approach, and we will be able to see how the development of those players should be much, much smoother from the 16s to 18s to the 23s. And I'm excited to see how that happens now going forward.
Yeah, quickly on Gillard. Gillard is just, in shorter terms, he's just a coach who's helping in loan management. So the players that will be transitioning from U23 or U18 to loan system will be coached or helped by Ken Gillard, instead of him being the actual main U23 coach.
Yeah, so what I wanted to ask quickly is, before we move on to the next point I've got here, is this idea of the loan manager. If there were reports of how players like Joe Willock the clubs had to come to us to interview for the services of Joe Willock instead of us offering Joe Willock out. I don't know if people have any thoughts or any clarification on how that works.
Yes. You're muted, George. Okay.
Yeah. It's a hugely modern approach, right? Sorry, but
George.
when you're looking at, I think what we've seen right now is we're taking a lot of aspects from the Brentford model, and it just doesn't come from just actually their model approach. We're actually poaching specific people from Brentford, but they've really kind of compartmentalized their approaches. If you look at them as kind of a club, they're very, very modern, but they've done a lot of these things where they compartmentalize different aspects. So, they had a set piece coach specifically, they had a youth coach specifically, a loan manager, and now we're modernizing our setup. And, Ben Napier is a perfect example of that. So when we're talking about having a loan manager, we never had one before. Managing our loans is a major problem for asset development. Purely. Let's look at it from a business perspective. Having these kids waste around not getting first team football, but being too good for the academy does nothing for their development, but does nothing for them in terms of their asset development. Chelsea have done amazingly in this aspect. While they have quite a bloated youth squad and setup, they've shown that the power of a loan system can really supplement quite a bit of your financial aspects in terms of transfers. Having these kids go out to, AC Milan, who they had Fikayo Tomori, who they rated quite highly, but then went to AC Milan, have now received almost 30 million euros or 28 million euros. It shows the benefit of being forward planning in terms of just asset development. But let's get back onto the pitch, because I don't really like looking at youth as an asset specifically. But I really love the fact that we've now employed somebody to look at the career path of our players, right? Having teams come in to interview why they should have our players is just immensely smart. It happens in any job. You interview for a job, it makes sense to interview for our players. And, what it is for me is you look at that combined with Ken Gillard right now, that is an insanely smart appointment to facilitate this process far better. And that's not to say that it was failing. It actually refines an already excellent process. So if you look through, Daniel Ballard has had an immensely successful loan with Blackpool, earned promotion up now to the championship, and likely could maybe return, but that loan has been insanely successful. Joe Willock, there's nothing wrong with Joe Willock's loan, right? He's done actually quite the opposite. He's succeeded. He's shown that he can actually participate, in the Premier League, and not only participate, but be an active passenger in, helping and affect play. So that was been a very successful loan. And then lastly, Saliba. Look, you can question the ideas of why he went on loan and when, but the same thing happened. Nice had to interview for them, and we had a very specific way of making sure that these teams not only use these players, but they use them in the profile and the way that we want them to play in our first team. This makes their adaptation so much quicker, and it allows us to actually keep track of their development far better than just sending them out on loan for the financial aspect. It's insanely smart business, Karan, and when you combine it with somebody like Ken Gillard, who is a previous coach of these young talents, it just, when you combine the analyst approach to that process, but then with somebody that knows these players and knows these teams, it's a match made in heaven, really. That's what it is. And I just hope that people can understand that this is a calculated move. I know we've said it previously in the pod, but this isn't chance. Making these moves are the positive indicators that you can predict success, okay? It makes a reproducible blueprint that it's not specific to a player or to a generation. This is specific to how we conduct business, okay? And afterwards, we can evaluate maybe where some of the individual cases, they happen, right? You're going to have a bad loan every now and then, but having a process such thoroughbred like that ensures kind of success to the best of your ability as a planner. And so from an outside structure standpoint, it gets all the checks from me.
Yeah, I mean, so just start. I just want to get this in. So when it comes to what a lot of people don't realize, and a lot of people just say, because they go back to the Wenger days where it's just sort of leisured by youth for youth's sake, and they think that it's a very haphazard process, and if it wasn't for this, people are saying their jobs are being saved by this, or it's sort of the narratives that run across this, that from people that really, I'm not going to say I don't understand, but are not informed on the hirings and the way we progressed as a club. I just feel like we're looking at developing a culture, as I said before, in terms of not producing players to sell, but producing players that understand who we are as a club and loaning them out at the proper fit time that is appropriate for their development. So, and only loaning them out to clubs that are going to promise them starting time and promising us that they are going to keep our players in the best care possible. So, just before we move on, if you want to add anything on.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say, we Arsenal fans, have you seen a player with a more successful loan from our club than Willock? I haven't. Mavropanos also had a very successful loan.
Saliba
Ballard had a very successful loan. Like Blackpool fans really want him back. Like even Ainsley had many offers with like Leicester, Southampton wanting him on loan, but they wanted him at right back, and Ainsley wanted to go and play central midfield. So you see that we had offers, and he chose one more suited to what Ainsley wanted. In the past, we haven't had loans as regimented as this. So, and with Gillard coming in and actually coaching players to find a more suitable place to actually improve them personally, will only reap the benefits for Arsenal.
And one of the additions, maybe just really quickly to this, is when you're looking at just the loans, it's not just loans, it's even youth recruitment. One of the changes that we've seen, particularly with Per Mertesacker, in the last year, I'm just going to give you a couple names that I'll probably miss all of them, but Per Mertesacker in the last summer has recruited George Lewis, Muller, Akinola, Micciche, Ideho, Dinziehi, as well as Salah Eddin, all in the last year, who are all, as well. It's a strategy change in terms of recruiting youth profiles, not only to fill out the squad that have left, because that is one aspect, but they represent gaps in the first team. If you do go through it, a target man striker, maybe a defensive midfielder, if you want to add, not only that, they look at, interior eights, these are some profiles that we could use in the first team. And so when you combine just not only the loans, but then us looking at recruiting youth for a very specific gap in the first team, it's all premeditated. These aren't chances. And I just want to praise that work, because that year has been an unprecedented year of youth recruitment. I don't know if anybody else can remember a time that we recruited almost 7 or 8 foreign talents for the specific purpose of introducing them to our U23 setup. We've done a couple, 1 or 2, but there was a very clear shift in terms of recruiting these amount of talents.
Like maybe it's just my personal ignorance, but I can't remember something like the amount of talent we've integrated. I can't think of a comparable example to it. I don't know if anyone can. Maybe it's just my ignorance on the matter. So it just seems like it's a lot in a very short amount of time. And I don't really remember.
I think currently the last time they did that when they had it was a gradual influx of players like Benacer, Marlon. But they didn't come in one summer. They came over a few seasons, and then they were sort of cultivated. But I think a lot of the things that we're doing now, we learned our lessons from those players developing, and then us feeling like we had to let them go because we couldn't give them a pathway into the first team, which is the sad thing. And a lot of our fan base are still suffering seeing these kids go off to other clubs, like Benacer and Marlon, and so. And a lot of people would have followed those kids, and now they've gone on to other clubs and been successful. We've been very rueful about the fact that we hadn't got the best out of them. The other thing I think is interesting is that, that was what George mentioned there was revolutionary, but I think we're going to add another layer going forward, and you're probably hearing the first signs of it. Edu has got contacts. His greatest strength is the South American market, and we've been wanting, people asked before slating Edu. I know Edu's like Marmite at our club. Some people love him, and there's not many people love him that I know of. But I'm just saying, some of us remember him as a player, and in our mind, he's still a legend. And think, give the guy a bit of a chance. And there's other people who already have blamed him for everything that's gone on over the last 2 years, when in reality he's not really been probably responsible for a lot of those things. But as I said, that's a separate issue. But I think recently we just heard that link about, is it the Peruvian central defender? Now, what you're probably going to see going forward is that he will now start tapping into that South American market to bring in gaps that we have within youth profiles. As we said, one of the youth profile gaps we have is we don't really have that many quality left backs, right? And at the moment, we're all sort of scratching our heads thinking, is Lopez ready? And Lopez, if those of you guys who are looking at him, let's just talk about it. He's probably not ready for a first team challenge. And if he was, he would have been ready-made to go in to the first team squad and get more involved. I think he's probably going to go off on loan.
And Tierney was injured, so he could have played.
Yeah. So what I would say in that sense, we need to sort of use the foreign market, not only just picking up players from Europe, but also being able to sort of look at the South American market and bring those in. We should be finding the one good thing about Brexit for us is that it should be easier for us to be able to bring those talents in, and that should add another extra layer of recruitment that we haven't probably seen this year. So I'm really excited to see that, and in terms of how that goes forward.
Don't worry, guys. We are going to get on to the players, but I just want to focus on one last point before we do. So. I know from talking to all three of you that you guys have differing opinions on this philosophy to do with youth development versus youth integration. And I want to know. I want all three of you to give your opinions on it, and I want you to express yourselves and give your opinion to the people.
Yeah. So I think most people can maybe tell from my previous appearances on the pod, I'm really a pragmatist at heart. in terms of how I view football. I really view football, I wouldn't say negatively, but how can the team hurt me? And I do a very much a pragmatist approach to how I would want to coach my youngsters too. And so how I view youth development, one thing that has to be said is that it's a maze. It's not a linear trajectory, okay? I think I said this maybe in the past, but for every Benicophobe, you get a Martinelli. And these youth talents and trying to understand projection as a coach is really almost a needle in a haystack to a certain extent. But if you have kind of the processes that you know what to look for, it becomes a lot easier maybe to highlight what players you might find to be successful, really. And I look at some very specific things from a youth prospect for me that I need to see if I'm going to see them kind of integrate to the first team. So firstly, I really look at a 5-yard burst. I've talked about this. I think it's the most critical thing, not just in youth development, but in the Premier League and how we view modern football. And so for me, a youth talent has to have an elite 5-yard burst, but he also has to carry the same intensity over 15 yards. If I see that lacking in any one of the two, I'm not confident in him being able to translate that material into the first team. I like a very kind of purposeful myriad of physical and technical ability. I think in youth, what happens, you've got these two different youth prospects, really. You've got the physical beast who, can overpower quite a lot of the players. Yeah. And, they may not have to work on maybe some of the technical skills. And then on the alternative aspect, you might have this technical phenom who, learns kind of the technical battles, but may not be physically ready for a first team football. And so he has different obstacles, right? In general, how I view a youth is I would never make an accommodation personally for an individual youth prospect. How I view football in my system, I place the system far more over individuals. That's just a personal thing for me. And so when I look at youth integration, really in that aspect, I need to make sure that I have the profiles that accommodate that player before chucking him into the team. And there's other approaches that, think just throw him into the deep end, which is totally valid. But I use the Saliba as an example. So why I was such a fan of the loan. I think we have a generational talent who, I'll say it again, will reevaluate how we look at center backs. That's how highly I rate this kid. And a lot of people will say, well, George, if he's so good, and he would improve us so much, and that's how high you rate him, why wouldn't you want him starting? Well, I think there were a lot of physical and mental things that were holding him back. But fundamentally, I don't think we had the midfield to support his type of profile. So when I look at players, okay, I don't just look at their individual talent and impact on the team. I look at it, how do they impact the system? And for me, having a player who likes to step into midfield, I needed to make sure that we surround him with potentially, pacey, experienced pros who, in case there is a mistake and there is a breakdown, again, back to my pragmatist views, we're able to correct that, or we're able to account for that. So when I look at a youth player, I'm much more looking at, I guess, the system as a whole and how they may complement to other players, as opposed to saying this kid is just too talented, we have to drop him in and we have to fit him in. Now, again, I just want to make it clear that the opposite isn't wrong. It's just how I view myself. But if I were just to highlight some specific traits that you really need, right? You need to have half-turn ability. You need to have scanning is another trait I really look at, which just means, how often do you look back and kind of on your blind side and look towards your picture, drawing a picture in your mind. Arsene Wenger very famously said that's one of the major things that he looks at. It's also something I look at. And then again, that 5-yard burst, right? When you combine those three things for me, and as well as maintaining that intensity over 15 yards, those are the core pillars that I personally look at for determining if a youth's going to excel or not. And if you lack in one of those, I really struggle to see you making it far, despite maybe your technical feats, despite maybe your physical feats. But that's what I would say I look for.
Just one more thing I want to add on to that. Those are extremely good points. The last point I want to add on in terms of fundamental skill is an ability, what I call zonal discipline, the ability to know what your zone is on the pitch and know when to evacuate and stay in your zone. So if you're looking at where players are on the pitch, where are you meant to be? Where are you meant to look at? If you're looking in terms of each phase of the pitch, what zone of the pitch? We mentioned this in the previous podcast. what zone of the pitch are you meant to be? Where are you meant to be? Where you have to, as a lot of managers always say, you have to trust your teammates around you to get the ball to you. And if you don't have that trust in your teammates, and those teammates don't have the trust in you to be in the place where you want to be, you cannot make it. But Norm, I wanted to get your opinion on this. I know you have a bit of a different opinion on this development integration issue.
Yeah, I mean, I look, a lot of the points that George said in terms of fundamentals, in terms of individual quality that you're looking for, I would say, most coaches would look for that. And for me, I think when I was younger, when I was looking at it from a coaching perspective, I mean, you guys, anyone who knows me, who follow me or been on my spaces, I'm unashamedly a massive Arsene Wenger fan. And when I was growing up as a kid, I took inspiration from him, and then when I did coaching, I took inspiration from him. I'd look at everything in terms of how he would get into the minds of the players. And so he would used to say that technical ability is something when you get to about 14, you couldn't coach that after that point, because it's, you either had it or you didn't have it, right? So you either had physically teenagers, I've worked with teenagers all my life, so I know that they're still developing physically. So sometimes as a coach at that level, you have to be patient, because they might develop physically more than what you think, but they can't suddenly become a technical whiz kid if they didn't by 14 develop those core skills that they need as a football player. Now, football intelligence, developing that is an interesting question, because obviously depending on their coaching environment and the kind of things that go into those players, you can improve a kid's footballing intelligence, his footballing IQ. But as I said, like with anybody, some of us here, we might be able to get to university and go and do a PhD, and some of us might only be able to go up and get a degree, and some people might leave college and think that's it, So the truth is, individual players will have a limit in terms of how far you can educate them and how much they can absorb, right? But that also plays a part and role in terms of how they understand what's going on in a game situation. Arsene had a very interesting philosophy. I was talking to someone, I wasn't sure, very recently, and we were debating how Mourinho was on the opposite spectrum. He would micromanage a lot of his players, and he would want players to know specifically where to be and how to play. And Arsene came up with an interesting philosophy, which I sort of agreed and leaned towards. But I mean, I've sort of adapted in my coaching philosophy when I've been coaching, which is allowing players to develop their intelligence by posing problems to players during training. And I hear that Thomas Tuchel does the same thing at Chelsea with his players. So I think that basically you create a training environment where they come in and you improve their football intelligence by putting them in under pressure situations, and then making them decide in those pressure situations repeatedly the right kind of choices. So as I said, for players to be able to do that, they have to develop certain aspects and traits. Now you can go back into the classroom as a coach and teach them, right, this is what you did right and this is what you did wrong in these kind of scenarios. Going back to Curran's point about vacating space, when to sort of maintain it, how to maintain shape. But there are some natural things that as a coach at that level, you have to wait for those players to develop. And sometimes, and I'll give you some examples, Omari Hutchinson, which we're probably going to come on to later, right? He started off as a left back. And I'd lost track of him for about a year, because I think that was when he was about 14. He saw himself as a left back, and the coaches there were pretty sure that that's where he's going to start off. Where he's starting off, and what we'll see later on when we talk about him, are completely two different things. And I think Ashley Cole was another example. He started off, I think, playing as a forward, ended up then playing as a winger, and then ended up being a world-class left back. All of these guys, by the way, are coming through the Arsenal youth system. So a lot of my ideas about young players is it's very difficult to pin them in a position until you understand them as a whole, complete entity. And we think, if you look at Saka, we sort of saw that as well. I think, George, we were talking about this the other day. I said, look, how many of us as coaches looking at Saka, just from an outside perspective, because we don't train with we don't train the kid, we don't go to the training sessions. How many of us would have said that when he made his debut at left back, would we see him be a top class right winger, right? Because he certainly didn't look that when he first played, and I can't remember the game now where he first played right wing. And I think he had a really poor game. I don't know, CK, if you remember that game, which was it Wolves? I can't remember.
Yes, he did.
And he didn't play as well that first time as he plays now. And I think what we need to understand is sometimes you have to pose these problems to the players in terms of how we train them and how we sort of try to test them. And I think Emma Smith Rowe next year, and this is like again comes under development. I don't want to sort of go into the first thing, but a lot of our audience won't know some of our young players, but they will be able to see this development happening with some of the players that have made into the first team. Will still be in a developmental phase. I think Mikel is possibly going to play him at left wing, and he will help his development by allowing him to play in multiple positions. So for me, I think the only way a coach, and this is where I might differ from George, and I might have got it different from him, is to be able to sort of play players in different positions and to test their understanding of the game by playing them and training them in different positions to find what I would call their true position. And you sort of will only, I think when I've done that in my coaching experience, I've always been surprised how players have responded to that kind of challenge. But whatever happened, even if they didn't make that position their position, they grew from the experience of playing in multiple positions and being able to ask to play in multiple zones. So I sort of see it as, the system is important, but we shouldn't allow the system completely to hamper the development of a young player. I think it's different, a question when you're bringing in a player who's already played multiple years in a certain position, and he's going to find it very difficult as a more experienced player to be able to play in different positions because, they've pinned their position down. Just a crazy example, you couldn't ask Tony Adams to go and play centre forward after he became a veteran because he's been conditioned to play central defence. But maybe if you took a young Tony and said, right, let's at the age of 16, let's see if you can head a few of these balls into the back of the net, he'll give it a go. I think Sol Campbell, when he first started, he started off as a centre forward and he ended up playing at centre back, by accident almost. So youth development is never in my mind linear. I think there's lots of things coaches have to understand about the players before they eventually, when we see them get to the first team, and even then they still have room to sort of find their position and develop their skill set and understanding of the game.
So what I want to do right now is I want to move into the players. So what I'm going to ask for each of the three of you is so we're going to go through all the teams, right? We're going to go under 2018 and under 23 teams, and then eventually the first team. What I want to do is I'm going to do it in segments. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask each of you to name one player from each team that you really are excited about, and give them just a short summary of what makes them so interesting, why you're so excited, and then we're going to move on to the under 23 teams, and then we'll end up with the first team. So George, if you want to start?
Sure. So it's kind of apropos that we start with the U18s because I think it carries technically our biggest prospect, even though he's been in the U23s, but he is a U18, technically, is Keto Taylor Hart. I think I'll do some special mentions in terms of other players just to look out for in case, there's other listeners. You have your Amari Hutchinson, you have Marcelo Flores, who are excellent players maybe to look out for, as well as Zane Monlouis, who's one of those kind of Rolls Royce of a center back. You've also got some other right back that I think, Chris is really a fan of, so I'll leave it to him. But Keto Taylor Hart, he's going to be my pick. Everybody on Twitter knows that's my guy. And why do I like Keto Taylor Hart so much? Well, he's a typical Arsenal forward with kind of the versatility to play all across the front line. His technical security is actually so great that Steve Bold has let him play, well, not let him, but made him play in midfield. And so, but he's best deployed really as a left wing. That's the first thing kind of to get it off the boat. And when you're looking at Keto Taylor Hart, why is it that I feel the hype is warranted, but also that I feel he's our best Hale End talent that really we've ever produced is he's got this scary myriad of physical and technical qualities. So Keto was always a very skinny but supremely technical player, but didn't really kind of influence himself on the game as often as really he could have with his ability. But what happened is, again, you've got this kid that kind of went through a growth spurt over the last year. And, you've got a 17-year-old who now has just world-class technical ability, but then shot up to 6 feet and has become a man and just a broad spectrum. And now things start to get really interesting. So when you look at his profile, he's an ambipedal, which just means two-footed, world-class technician that can go in and out on both sides. He show it both on the right or on the left. And he's really a true cage baller in every sense of the word. He's very Reece Nelson-like in terms of his feet. But one thing that I really look for and what I love is he creates effective separation from a standstill start kind of at will. and he has this ability to constantly drive, attack, exploit, and penetrate defensive gaps kind of in an unrelenting fashion. Kind of my favorite performance over the past year that he really showed this was Derby in their U23s. He just consistently received the ball on a standstill and roasted their entire, not just right back, but really their midfield and defensive line by constantly penetrating. And he can be a technical reference in an attack, so he's able to kind of control the tempo of a game. So he's so technical, he's able to kind of slow things down or speed it up depending kind of on the game state that's really required. He's also already among the fastest recorded in the academy. And so again, you're looking at a 6-foot Reece Nelson level technician that's got Ismaila Sarr's running power. That's really scary. When you look at his superpower, again, like it's easy to highlight the pace, the technique, the drive to go at defenses. But really what now has me excited is when you combine these things with his short back lift. So what do I mean by that? He's able to pop off shots with venom, power, and accuracy. And so I think what that does is it allows us to separate him really as a complete talent that's really rare to find in a winger profile, where he's not just a creative beast, but he's going to be a goal-scoring phenom himself. He's got such power into his shot that it's just a matter of picking your spots, but he's got the ability to work on that. I think maybe things that he can work on, though, are as a dribbly type, he does fall prey to maybe not releasing the ball at the right time. And I think he can learn to kind of vary his passing repertoire just to become a little bit more complete. So he is a dribbling type. He doesn't prefer to pass, but make no mistake, he does have a final ball on him. It's just, I think he could maybe work on exploiting it a little bit more. But again, like I'm really nitpicking at this point. Like this kid is one of the most complete players I've seen, really. I think he's physical enough to shake defenders kind of in contact on the dribble. He's got that footballing IQ. Like I said, he's played in midfield. He plays all across, really not just the front line, but he's played in midfield. And again, that back lift suggests kind of a potent goal output that's not really seen in our previous winger talents, in my opinion. I mean, Bukayo has always had a very good striking technique, but I wouldn't say he's had a short back lift. And so that's really what the kind of scary thing with this winger is. He's got great technique, but a short back lift is what you would maybe associate with a Bruno Fernandes, those types, those ones that can pop off shots really quick. Even a James Maddison, who we're linked with, they all carry these short back lifts, and that's what you can maybe use as an indicator for a goal scoring output. So sprinkle that in with like the world-class technique in and out. And yeah, lads, that's a bad man. That's a very, very bad man. Potential, it's priceless for me. It's something that we really need to look at, and I think he's due a Bukayo-esque explosion.
Yeah. Okay. So, Nom, do you have a player in mind, or has George?
Yeah, George. I mean, listen, it's very difficult to sort of top what George says about KTH, but for me, Omari Hutchinson's been really interesting. I've been watching him recently, and as I said, I lost track of him between 14 and 16. Because it's very difficult sometimes to find what's happening up under, below under 16 level. You hear snippets of news. There aren't that many people following them at that age group, unless it's parents, obviously, and it would be a bit weird if there was, to be frank. But what's so interesting is seeing his development now. I think what's exciting me about him is, I think I saw him against, was it West Ham or Aston Villa? I think I've seen him in both games, to be honest. Yeah, West Ham. And he was spectacular in that game. He really surprised me, because I was actually looking not only at KTH, but I was looking at a couple of other players that are playing in that game. And what stood out for me in that performance, that he kept on getting goal scoring opportunities, and he kept on being able to break through the lines. He is different from KTH. He's a left footer playing on the right wing at the moment, and he cuts in, but he's equally comfortable playing in the left wing. When he was a youngster, he saw himself as a left back. And I remember, when we had our left back, upcoming left back crisis, I remember us contacting George, the guy who does the youth page. Yeah. And I said to him, listen, he started off as a left back. Do you think he could do an Ashley Cole-esque sort of move back there? Because he's got this raw pace. His crossing is pretty decent. He's not a finisher. So I think, are the clubs seeing him as like, this is a developmental phase for him? A bit like Saka when he first made his debut, they had to shoehorn him at left back, because I think it was against a youth game. I think it was the FA Youth Cup final, if I remember rightly. I saw him and he came in at left back. It's not. I know for a fact Saka at that time, he was really young, much younger than the other players, and they brought him in and he performed admirably. But obviously, as we know now, he was never going to be a left back. But I think with this kid, he's got the potential to be whatever the coaching team can sort of mold him into be. He's showing great attacking promise, but I I've got this hunch. Can he be brought back into something that he was doing when he was a youngster? I mean, let's just look. I don't want to do it because that is what's best for the squad per se, kind of thing. If it's not what's best for his development, I think there's a sort of balancing question the coach has to ask themselves. You know, is this move, if we were going to bring him back into a more defensive position, really the ideal thing? Is that what the player wants? Is that what we want? Do you know what I mean? Is that what his abilities want? But he has made me excited seeing his development, because I feel like there is a lot more to him than, you know, the little sort of young kid that I first saw when he was 14 and he was juggling the balls and doing a little intro. He's turned out to be quite a prospect, and his physical development and sort of trajectory has carried on to a different level to where I saw it going when I first saw him. So that has me excited and intrigued, right? And I'm looking forward to seeing how the coach is seeing, you know, going into next year, because I think next year for him will be critical as he steps up to the under-23s and becomes a regular.
Yeah. For me, my favorite is Brooke Norton-Coffey. Brooke Norton-Coffey right now is 17. He's a right back. He's already signed his pro contract. He signed it on the 15th of January, I think. His pro contract with Arsenal. Brooke is a right back who physically is even above under 23 level, in my opinion. He's physically at 17, he's like a grown man. He has immense running power. He's very good up and down. He's actually strong indoors defensively. He's actually decent on his left foot. I think as he's grown up, he's improved his passing. He made his under-18s England debut in March of this year. So, and next year he'll be 18. Brooke is my favorite player, probably because he's a right back, but offensively, he's top quality. But a lot of players, fullbacks, you see that are very good offensively, lack something defensively, and he doesn't. He's actually very good defensively and positionally. And he used to be a striker when he was like 11, 12 years old anyways. So in front of goal, he's actually very good. And with Brooke, I think you'll see more of an integration into the first team in the next 2 seasons. Maybe not next season, but the season after. And he did make his under-23s debut at 16. So he has seen high-level football. And he did make his under-16s England debut at 15. So Brooke is a player who, when he's first seen in the first team, people will be like, "Oh my gosh, who's this physical specimen?" But he's my favorite under-18s talent right now.
Okay, so I just want to quickly, guys, just for my player, I'm not sure if he's under 18 or under 21. How old is Okonkwo?
He's above 18. He's at 20, I think.
Is he 20?
Yeah,
okay, so that for my under 18, my under 18 work isn't great, but I'm going to start the under 23s with Okonkwo, because I think he's, as we've said privately together, he is someone that we should be looking for in terms of even giving him some first team, promoting him to the first team in terms of the third goalie, someone that could start to learn from the first team as some of these other talents like Kido and Aziz have started to learn from the first team. I rate his distribution. He's a good shot stopper, and I really do feel that he's someone that we're looking forward to the future. As we just said, he's someone that's integral to the setup of the youth. And when we signed him, I think it was with Nwokali, I think it was with both as well. We signed them together. So we're seen as very high-rated prospects in terms of promotion to the first team. And it goes to show what I was saying before. It's about fostering a culture of bringing players from the youth to the first team. And instead of looking to try to get players as high value as they can, and then try to ship them out. So I'll let George take his under 23 plan.
Yeah, under 23s, it's tough because I did maintain Kido just because of his age. He's kind of a U18, but he did play for the U23s. Another one worth mentioning that everybody knows is Miguel Aziz, but I'm not going to do that because I've been championing this person for over a year, and it's Valerian Balogun. Look, it might be kind of a popular choice, but it's popular choice for a reason. And there's a lot of excitement about his renewal news, but let's just get into kind of like the type of player he is. And he has a complete 9 profile. Curran will absolutely lose his nut over him. He's the kind of player that, he can play that target man striker, but he's also an off-the-shoulder demon. Like, he's just completely complete in terms of what skills he offers. But just some of the qualities, again, he's a complete 9 who can live off the shoulder of the last defender, but he's an instinctive striker, just a total killer. He's a clinical finisher with both feet. He constantly finds the bottom corners with kind of power and precision. He's got quick feet, blistering pace, and, predatory movement, really, to run in behind on defenses. Aubameyang has highlighted him in terms of his potential kind of in the past, and it just shows kind of the praise that this lad is on. In terms of his superpower, it'd be weird not to mention his composure in front of goal, but what really makes me excited is his ability to pin opposing center backs with ease. He constantly looks to set the ball, and he'll pin superior or perceived superior physical beasts by pinning them with his hands back to goal and before quickly turning on the afterburners and rolling them. And it's just, that skill is so elite for an EPL adaptation. It's hilarious. That's what makes him the complete kind of 9 profile, right? And he can receive under pressure, roll your contact before bursting onto goal. So it's vital when you're trying to project your adaptability to kind of a men's football. And what are some things maybe that he can work on, because it's all very exciting when I talk about him being really kind of complete. I think he can work on blocking passing lanes, particularly from a defensive front and from the front, really, and learn how to become a better pressing trigger with greater regularity. I think even in his cameo, what we did see is he's certainly a movement striker. He looks to take advantage of situations, but he doesn't necessarily have the verve or instinct to really press his marker. He can at times, but really he looks for his movements quite specifically. So I think he's going to have to learn how to adapt to the men's system in that aspect, because he's too good for the under 23s. And I think just in conclusion, he's kind of, I call him like a rich man's Timo Werner, because he's got the same kind of burst and half turn ability. He can play on the left wing. He's so technical on the dribble. He certainly can play left wing, but he's just got a total other dimension from a physical aspect. That's why we're so happy about him and why we think his ceiling is immense. I think he has the ability to lead the line for a top 6 club in the Premier League. It's high praise, but I think it's something that he'll prove in due course. And really, one little last bit of evidence, that cameo performance in City in the Cup, that is not a one-off. That he does that quite a bit, and he gave Ruben Diaz, who at the time was in immense form, the runaround. And it doesn't get too much more physical than that. So yeah, that Balogun's my choice.
Nom?
I mean, I'll focus on Aziz, but Miguel's. I think he's at that stage now where he's made a lot of under 23 appearances last year. He started off the year before playing as a 6, and I think Steve Bold was trying to, when he was coming through as a young player, trying to play him as a 6. And this year he's played more as an 8. When he was younger, he was playing at a 10. So he's getting a complete, what I would call, a youth team education. He's been educated to play in different zones. But I think they've explained it to him because they wanted to see if he could adapt to these positions and how he'd respond. And I think that's goes back to what I was saying about how when you're a youth coach, you sort of try to sort of test players by moving them around positions and seeing how they sort of respond to that and how they develop their football IQ. I think he's got to the point next year. I think a lot of fans, and I think the reason why I mentioned him is because I think a lot of fans have really high aspirations for him. They probably know a lot about him. He's probably been mentioned as much as Florent, but I don't think he's at the same phase of his development as Florent Balogun. I think he is more where he's developing like Balogun is developing more like Saka was developing. That you could see that he can make the transition up to the first team quite easily, and that might be down to physical, or it might be down to a number of different factors that allows a Saka to go in straight away versus a Emil Smith-Rowe who probably needs to go away and sort of work on certain aspects of their game. So for next year, what I'd love to see is Aziz being used through our loan system to find a club like Huddersfield who sort of really help nurture Emil Smith-Rowe to sort of get him to help him jump that development phase of his by playing football on a regular basis with guys who are much more physically developed than he is in a much more demanding league than, let's say, the under 23s, maybe in a championship level, because I think that will do massive positive things in regards to his development as a player. I think if he can go there and have one of those kind of loans, he will develop way quicker than if he was sitting in the under 23s and then getting maybe the odd 2 or 3 games in a season, or 4 or 5 games in a season. So I really look forward to seeing what decisions they make with Aziz. I mean, he's got those people who don't know what I'm talking about in terms of what he is as a player. He's a combination of being able to sort of a ball progressor and a ball carrier. He's got unique, exceptional qualities in midfield in terms of how he receives the ball on half turn. He's got elite 5-yard burst pace. So he's what I would call a modern CM. But as I said, in terms of his overall understanding of the game and his positioning, those kind of things that he needs to develop. And I think he only can develop that by taking the next step, just to play with regular men's game in a regular team and understand that kind of setup. And I think you will see potentially another Emil Smith Rowe kind of burst of development with that player. Right. So that's who I'm really looking forward to sort of seeing develop next year in a different scenario to maybe what George was saying about Balogun.
For me,
last of all, okay, go on. I was going to.
For me, if this counts, I think it will. Tyrese John Jules. He's 20. He was on loan at Doncaster, but he got injured. For me, Tyrese John Jules is our biggest U23 striker talent, on the same level as Balogun, maybe even better. But Tyrese John Jules, for me, he's played 10. He's played right wing, left wing. He's played striker. He's a very good striker. He's very good. The things he's good at are he's very good in the air. He has very good link-up play. Actually, he's actually a very good dribbler, and he's a flary player. So there'll be moments where you see him do a moment of special quality, and he'll show it. He likes to drop deep and go over his defenders one-on-one. He loves to drive at defenders. So he could easily play on the wing rather than just play striker. I don't think he's as ready for men's football as Balogun, but I think on a technical level, I think they're both massive talents. So Tyrese John Jules is injured right now, so he's getting back to fitness. He was at Doncaster on loan and he scored a couple goals, but he got injured and he's been rehabilitating at Arsenal. But yeah, Tyrese John Jules, I think, is one for the future with the under-23s.
And this is one thing I want to quickly touch on as well, because if you look at, I mean, I know it's only a quick snippet of what we look into, but if you look at following Balogun's announcement, his contract announcement, he was talking about he wanted to play across the front line. He wants to become a complete attacker. And I think that, again, I'm going to mention this again and again, it's about the culture of the club. We want to develop intelligent, high footballing IQ players that really want to be able to be playing across the front line, adaptable multiple formations, adaptable in multiple roles, but making sure that their roles are relevant to their main role, role in the team, and can actually help them promote their ability in that predominant role. And quickly, one player no one has touched on, and I really want to touch on, is a man by the name of Dan Ballard, because Dan Ballard on loan at Blackpool has been, I think, a great defensive utility centre back. Yeah, he's a good ball progressor. He's someone that Doncaster went back. Not Doncaster. He got confused with Blackpool. I meant Blackpool. Yeah, Doncaster's in my head from Diaries. Blackpool won him back. He's someone that is great in a 1v1. He's great as a ball progressor, and he's great in terms of organising a defence. And I really am looking forward to seeing what he produces in terms of next season. I hope he goes on loan again, maybe to Blackpool, because they really want him back.
He probably will, because he still needs to improve on the ball. In the past year and a half or so, he's definitely improved on the ball and been called up to England for improving his technical ability. But before that, he was just physically imposing. And you're muted, George, again. Physically imposing and very good in the air. But now I think he's definitely getting the step, and he's become more of a leader. If you've actually watched Blackpool, he's actually they depend on him at times in that defense, and he has won a playoff, so he's won a trophy unlike players for Spurs.
Yeah, I was just gonna go in. He's actually for Ireland. He plays for Ireland. So.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
And he's got his debut.
Well, he had a youth call up for England.
Yeah, he did have a youth, but he declared, and he's already got his debut internationally. So I think he's a great prospect to name current, because I think he's got the best defensive ability or pure defender in our academy. He is. So I'm excited for him. And then I think maybe we'll just round up on the starting team. And I don't want to go too big into this, because I think this is a youth setup, and you could talk about a lot. But for me, my favorite player is Saka. I think he has the highest potential out of all of our youths. When I look at Saka, okay, I haven't seen the level of completeness I've seen with that kind of player really in any of the ones that we've produced, right? You're looking at a player who's played in every single position. There's a graphic that's been going around on Twitter, and Chris has popped up for us. This is ridiculous. Can anybody name me a player that has actually provided output in each of these positions? Because Saka has.
In one season.
In one season. And not only just one season, but his first full season as a regular. It's immense. He is a consistent technical leader in a struggling, traditionally top 6 team who's got a proven output in every third of the pitch. He's ended the season since 2019 as the U21 player with the most goals and assists, outperforming Phil Foden, by the way, who gets these world-class shout praises. He's also ended the season with the highest non-penalty XG and XA across Europe's 5 biggest leagues, and in his international kind of debut has got a goal. So I'm really tired of seeing the disrespect that Bukayo Saka makes. It's time. This isn't a 2-3 month span. He has been kind of a leader in a team that has lacked one and has been getting Jordan rules for the better part of 8 months in the Premier League at 19 years of age. It's just crazy to me. It's crazy that people want to argue he isn't world class for me. I see him producing in every third of the pitch. Again, I have not seen a youth player. Does Phil Foden or Mason Mount do the same impact at right back or at left back? Because I've seen Bukayo do it. And so I'm ready to go all in on this kid, because I don't think he gets the praise he deserves just because we're in a struggling team. That's really what it is, because on pure output and consistency this season, he has outperformed output, if you want to go that way. He's outperformed in every third of the pitch, which no other youth player has done in the league. He's done it internationally. So whatever metric you want to use, he's passed with flying colors, and he's just so intelligent that this kid can be Clarence Seedorf, and he could also be a world-class right wing. There's no like debate in terms of where you can put him. He's going to exert his influence on the team. So yeah, Bukayo's my pick for the first team.
So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to let someone take Gabby, and I'm going to let someone take ESR. So who wants it? Who wants which?
No, who do you want? I know, man.
No, CK, you go for it, bro. You
okay, so for me, Smith Rowe is actually my favorite Arsenal player right now. Smith Rowe.
You should have picked Smith Rowe.
Yeah, I picked Smith Rowe.
Yeah.
Smith Rowe is my favorite Arsenal player right now. He made a drastic change to our season, to be honest. When he came in, you see we people don't like this, but in the 24 games he's been in the squad, we accumulated the second most points. And Smith Rowe was a massive part of that, because he was a player between the lines who can execute wide overloads on both sides, left and right, very well. He can play left wing very well. I think he's easily the fastest player on the ball at Arsenal, and he's one of the fastest players off the ball at the club. Smith Rowe, I think, in the future could be an elite 10 and a world-class left winger. Maybe that's too much praise to other people, but for me now, I think Smith Rowe, he will get more of the output that people would like to see in a 10, like Bruno gets, where Bruno gets so much output that people don't think you can call him a bad player, where Smith Rowe doesn't necessarily have the numbers to support my claims, but I think he'll get them next season. And for me, our biggest my favorite homegrown talent is Smith Rowe.
So none, you can take Gabby.
Martinelli.
Well, not, yeah, Gabby, yeah, possibly.
No.
Yeah. Okay, guys. So for me, I think what I've heard about Gabby is obviously when he first made his debut a couple seasons back, I think people were raving about him, were really excited about him, and rightly so. They were excited about him. And I think then obviously he had that injury. A lot of our fan base, and I think a lot of the discussions I've had with fans this year and recently has been like, why hasn't Martinelli been playing? People are desperate for this guy to be playing in the squad. We've discussed, I think, the four of us on Twitter and on Spaces, why that wasn't the case, because we've had to manage his injury towards the end of the season, and just throughout that half that he did get himself managed to be fit. I think you start to see glimpses of his development. I know the coaching team have been working with him behind the scenes in trying to sort of make sure that the injury hadn't stifled his progress. And if you can see, and I started seeing it recently, you'll see that his game has developed. It's become much more rounded. Even though he's now playing at whether he comes at left wing or at centre forward, his game is much more well rounded. He understands more about how to receive the ball and how to sort of lay it off and what to do in different situations. And I think that education wasn't complete for him. When he first came to us, he was very raw, and he was playing with instinct, and he was playing off the cuff. Now he sort of understands the principles of play that he's been asked to sort of commit to, depending on what position of the pitch he's on. And I think that's a lot of credit has to go to Mikel and his coaching team. We won't see the benefits of it all last year, but if you put up, I don't know if I've asked if someone could put up his FBref details, because
I'm just getting up now.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at some of the stats there, you can see that this guy is literally waiting to explode. It's really hard being Martinelli, I guess, when you're young and so talented, to be asked by the coach to wait and to be patient. But I honestly think because of his football IQ and his demeanour and his personality, he's been able to sort of understand what Mikel wants from him, and he's been very, very compliant in terms of understanding what the coach wants from him and how this is going to help him in the future. So if you look at those stats there, if we go to the top, I know this is a small sample, guys, but in that small sample, you can see the potential this guy's got. If you look at his non-penalty goals, if you look at his XG, non-penalty XG, it's in the, I'll wait for
It's gone a bit too far. Just give me a second.
Yeah. So if you look at it, it's in the 98th percentile, right? If you look at, for example, what his XA is, you'll see that it's on the 95th percentile. So this kid, I think almost that he's been out of the limelight. I don't think it is the case with our fans, but I think a lot of the fans in the Premiership are forgetting what kind of exciting talent we've got in our hands here. I think next year he'll be challenging Oba for that spot in the first team. I think he'll be also challenging to play, depending on the opposition that we have on that left wing with Emil, if we need more penetration. I think next year is going to be huge for him. You'll see him produce consistent technical performances, not just looking for moments of brilliance like he could achieve the first year that we saw him, but consistent output, consistent performances, and a consistent threat to opposition. That the opposition will find him not just a handful because of his personality and his physical, trait, but now because of his development, understanding of the game. You'll see a different beast altogether, and I'm really, really excited about him. More excited than I was when I first saw him, because I could see the rough edges, but I could see the year just gone past in that last 6 months, how much work has been done with this guy.
Yeah, he has more. For me, if he has more, since Arteta has worked on him in the past season, I think he has more tempo control and the ability to not go 100% all the time. Because if you watch Martinelli in his first season, he was always up and down. He never slowed down. He was always 100%. And a lot of fast players and explosive players start out like that. They're always fast. And he's calmed down, and he creates chances a bit better for me, anyways. And
I've got a better reference for now, because it's a bit choppy, so I'm not bring it up in a second. So, sorry, keep going.
And one thing Norm didn't mention is his elite heading ability.
I know we haven't seen it this year, but you'll definitely see it. I think next year.
In his first season, we saw it a lot.
Yeah, if we can get a right wing presence in terms of crossing, you will see a double threat in the box in terms of the angles that the crosses are coming in at, Martinelli will come to the front because I think Balogun's not a bad header of the ball, but I think Martinelli's heading is elite.
a different level.
So yeah, if you look at his attacking stats there, I mean his defensive stats for a striker or an attacking player are off the chart. We know how brilliant he is at pressing. We know
this is it. The
that he
95%, 95%.
So what you're seeing now, I think, honestly, is the rounding off of Martinelli's game, the development of his IQ in terms of the two positions that we want him to play next year, and the continuous education that we talk about. I mean, Saka's early education about playing different positions have helped him adapt to the first team. Martinelli's coming to the first team and he's getting that education now, and Emil Smith-Rowe is in that same kind of development phase now as well. And that's what Mikel talks about. If you listen carefully, he always says that players are at a certain development phase. What he means by that is dependent on how they have understood the roles and the positions that they've been asked to play within a team. He doesn't want a player coming in just being able to play one position. He wants them to have the ability to play multiple positions so they can be tactically flexible during a game.
Okay, so just before we head out, please, we're pushing an hour 30. I just want to let Chris get in because I think he wanted to say something before we headed out.
On scouting players, for me, when I would look at a player, for me in particular, it would be, I'd first look at the needs of the club. So a lot of people, when they say, oh, we should sign this player, they never necessarily look at what your club actually needs, because you could sign a world-class striker talent, but if they don't fit what your club actually utilizes, that player may never succeed at your actual club. So you actually need to look at the actual profiles that you need. Another thing is look at a player in different scenarios. So look at them in different weather, playing against a different team, playing against a big team in a cup competition, and how a player adapts to certain things. For example, look at a player, how they play in the 5 minutes after they go into a 50-50 tackle, or how they react to getting a yellow card, or how they react to going a man down, stuff like that. Because that teaches you a lot about a player's personality and mentality, which is just as important as their technical ability or physical capabilities on the pitch. Because you could be the most technically gifted player in the world, but if mentally you can't apply your talents, it's useless. So when looking at a player, for me anyways, you have to look at all them aspects rather than just looking at their ability on the pitch.
Okay, great. I mean, that about sums it up for today. I just want to thank Nom for coming on. So thank you very much, Nom. If you want to plug your stuff before we go.
Listen, guys, I just remembered from my last discussion with you guys what my @ is, but I'm sure people find me on Twitter.
It's there.
It's there.
Yeah, he's CK is almost like my bodyguard on this front now. He just like puts stuff up there to make sure I forget to not promote myself. I'm like the old guy who stumbles in here and end up talking for about. You guys are just literally helping me with my dementia, to be honest. You know what I mean? So that's how I see it. Okay, so it's been a real pleasure, honestly, as usual, to talk with you guys. And to the audience, I hope they found it informative. I hope they, they can go away and think about some of the things that we've said, and I hope it stimulated them and got them as excited as it has got us in terms of what's happening at youth level, all the way from the younger under 16s to all the way up to the first team. So I really hope we can add to that positivity and people looking forward to next season and seeing how these players go.
So just to wrap it up, so George, if you want to plug your stuff.
Yeah, lads, everybody knows this is probably one of my favorite topics that we've done. It probably ran a little bit longer. Yeah, and I just hope everybody, again, got the last thing I really want to hammer home before I plug the socials is that this isn't chance or coincidence. This has been premeditated planning for a very long time, since 2018. And I hope people can see the fruits of that labor, because really we're on the precipice. If people think that this U23 generation that we just had with ESR, Saka, and Willock are good, wait until you see the U18s and what's coming up, because we have a consistent influx that are ready for the next couple of years. But yeah, you guys all know where to find me, at GeorgeV_AFC, and here, of course, at Fall Over Passion.
So CK, before I let everyone go, just plug your stuff.
You can find me on Twitter, PureCKK. I also liked this topic very much because a lot of people think I'm very optimistic for the next season, and the youth we have is a lot to do with it, because there's even players that we didn't mention, like Patino and stuff like that. Patino, Surgeon, who are
go on forever.
massive talent. We have so many talents in our club right now that next season will be massive and will make names for themselves. So yeah, pure CK on Twitter, and keep liking, commenting, and subscribing and stuff like that on our YouTube, and check out our Spotify's every Monday, the podcast every Monday.
So just to quickly say that, so there's a couple of things we need to plug. First of all, my name's Karen. Wrong hand. The Twitter's there. The Twitter's there at cc_bop2. Please, guys, follow us on Twitter. You've got it right, CK, for once, not instead of the old man that you're following. But so please follow us on Ball Over Passion on Twitter, as well as the YouTube Ball Over Passion. I think CK was talking about releasing a TikTok soon. We'll keep you updated with that. Follow the Fantasy League as well if you're in it. I'm doing horribly, to be honest. I'm like mid of a pack. I think CK's got about 10 points on me. So then also as well. So the last thing I want to tell you is really appreciate everything that's happening so far. I'm seeing a lot of interactions with people that I've never met, and I'm really interested in seeing people's opinions and getting to know people. So thank you guys. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, and just stream it on Spotify on Mondays, and the podcast will be on YouTube on a Wednesdays.
Yes.
On a Wednesday.
Yeah, and tell us who you'd like to see come back. If you want to see Nom come back, or Wave, or Caris, Zico, Rithik,
Liaz,
A1, someone like that. Babs, anyone you want to see come back, tell us.
Because we've had some great guests, and we want to know what you guys think of them as well. So,
yeah, don't vote for me, guys. Vote for some of the more interesting people.
Yeah, thank you guys.
I don't know if I've got the stamina for repeated appearances, but I'll try. I'll try.
Thank you guys, and like, comment, subscribe, and we'll see you later. Bye now.